Welcome to Castlemaine Commons, our second show, and this is focused on the rise of neighbourhood resilience. We have a number of guests that are speaking tonight. Just to let you know who's here, we've got Kath Coff speaking from Nalderun. Can you wave, Kath? We've got Emma King speaking on behalf of Friars Forest and Friars Town. Hi, Emma King. Got Camilo Demarco speaking for Campbells Creek and maybe a little bit of Nalderun. Hey, Camilo. And Alex Kelly on behalf of the West End Resilience Group. Hey, Alex. Amy Atkinson from the Maldon Neighbourhood Community Centre. And Carmela Leone, who is a social researcher and also the moderator of the Castlemaine Community Disaster Resilience Facebook group. So welcome, everybody. I'd like to acknowledge that we are on Nalderun country. I'd like to acknowledge the elders past, present and future, and acknowledge that the land was never ceded. So tonight's show is brought to you by Castlemaine Commons, where we are running weekly YouTube shows, Wednesdays at 8 o'clock, in response to the pandemic, and we want to foster connections, make sense of what is happening in our world, catalyse action, and together create our local future. As I said, tonight is focused really on the rise of the neighbourhood resilience groups and what's been going on in and around Castlemaine in response to the pandemic. So Emma King is part of the Castlemaine Collective that runs Castlemaine Commons, and she's going to pose the first question to our guests.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Sorry, people, still getting used to this technology. As Natalie said, I live out at Friars Forest, and we're obviously part of Friars Town. We have a very functional community out there. We've been sort of a little bit remote, and we've got the school there, the CFA, and we have a very good social connections there, which have been growing really beautifully since we've all been in lockdown, with lots of fun and interesting communications happening. But why don't we go around and see, let everyone have a little chat about what's happening in their communities next up. So Kath, do you want to kick off and have a bit of a talk about what the Nalderun community's been up to?
G'day everyone. What we've been up to. So we started quite a bit before when it got really hard. Cam's also going to be talking about it as well. And it's, yeah, we've just learned to come together very quickly in these sort of situations. We are like a giant family, and we were able to move quite quickly and when we realised that it was needed. And I also chair now the food management meeting, because we've all sort of come together in regards to food. Yeah, that's just a little bit about myself.
Camilo, maybe you'd like to talk a little bit about what Nalderun's been doing. I know that you've been central to the practical side.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. So quite early on, Kath and I caught up, and when early days of this started to, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep. In the early days when I could see that this was a thing and this started to become a thing, I sent out a text to a number of people, and a number of those people are here tonight, and just felt it was action mode. And so Kath and I guess through my work, I had the capacity and flexibility to shift into different roles. So that's what I did, and Kath and I caught up, and luckily, due to we already had an established food share thing happening at Bedak. So my role there is a men's program coordinator at Bendigo District Aboriginal Co-op, and as part of that role, there's some great men there, in particular John Nicholson, who was really keen to kick off a food share thing a couple of years ago. So we've been doing that unfunded as a pretty much as a love gig at Bedak through the Aboriginal Men's Shed. And kind of leveraged off that, and I could see that we're going to need to sort out food and essentials for the mob here. And so Kath and I caught up and actioned that and got things happening, and it's essentially rolled from that early stage, really. So we had the flexibility and ability to get shit happening, which is what we did.
Thanks, Camilo.
Great. And Alex, you've been, the West End Resilience group that you're involved in was kicked off a little bit before all this happened. Do you want to have a bit of a chat about what you're doing in your area?
Sure. So I moved into this part of town, and we just called it West End Resilience because of the West End Hall. So we're sort of over the jail side of town, between Jingle and View Streets. And we'd sort of started talking about it, a small group of us, late last year as the fire seasons were starting to ramp up, and we planned to have a meeting in February. We thought we'd wait till after the summer holidays and get together with people. So we had a meeting in February, and at that meeting there was about 60 of us, and we basically thought we'd have 12 months of potluck dinners and slowly getting to know each other and doing some gardening stuff to kind of try and build our resilience ahead of what we thought might be another full-on fire season at the end of this year. But very quickly it turned out that we should take advantage of those new networks and respond to this. So with the 60 or so people that had already come to the first meeting, we did a letterbox drop of what ended up being about 480 houses in the area. And we've set up WhatsApp, Facebook, and a phone that we share. So we're trying to do two things at once at the moment. I guess one is continue to build the relationships and the networks between ourselves, and then also do some really practical, responsive stuff at the same time. So we're kind of a very new network that are building ourselves as we're doing this work in response to this immediate crisis.
Beautiful. And Amy, you're in a bit of a different sort of community setting there, the community house. And I imagine you've been pretty busy the last couple of months. Do you want us to chat about that?
Yeah, so it is quite different in that the Neighbourhood House has been in existence since '81. But I think the essential part of it is really a similar response to other groups that have established more recently, in that it's around creating community connection. So what we've done since the lockdown and since COVID-19 is, I guess, quickly respond to potential and perceived need in the community. So a lot of the work has been around, sharing information and around maintaining the connections that we already have with the groups in town and people in town, and particularly those who are older and more vulnerable. And I guess we've also come together with other organisations across the Shire to respond practically in terms of food relief. So we've been involved in the Mount Alexander community pantry with a focus on some work in Maldon particularly. But of course, we always like to work collaboratively across bigger communities than that. But yeah, so quite an established group.
Natalie, were you about to say something?
Yeah, sorry. I understand there's quite a few. We might come back to Alex in a minute because she's got some slides to share about what the West End Resilience Group is doing. But maybe Carmela, you'd like to mention the other groups, or Emma, about other groups that are happening, because we couldn't have everybody on the show. So should we mention those? Do you know others that are around, Carmela? We've got a bit of a list as well.
Yeah, look, I don't think my list will be very different from yours at this stage. I've just, what I've been doing is just talking to people sort of within my own group, but also outside of that when I come across people and we start talking about resilience. So I set up the Facebook page, the group, with the idea of sharing resources, because my interest in resilience is very sort of theoretical. I'm interested in frameworks and models, and so I post a lot of articles about resilience and what's happening around the world, just to give people ideas and resources. But through that, there was a suggestion that we kind of pull all the groups together, and I've got a planning background. So I suggested that I could map sort of all the different groups, and that's really preliminary at the moment. I don't have a lot to report, but you've probably got the same names as as I have, sort of the Vanstone Road area, Saint Street up near us. I'm in Britton Street, so just around Greenhill Avenue. There's Carolyn Nielsen and up where she is near the school, Gingell Street, there's the West End people, of course. Near you, Natalie, your area up there. I know something's just starting up in Etty Street. Goldsmith Street just started something last year, and Wimble Street, I believe, as well on the north side. So my intention is to map this out so that we can see where, what's missing, just see the gaps.
Anybody know of any others?
Kath?
Kath?
Yeah, so I suppose for in regards to what we did is because we do a lot of networking anyway, it's literally how we work, like a giant spider web across communities. We were very quickly this is not just groups in the community. I mean, I worked a lot with Marcel, with Love Thy Neighbour, but there's a lot of other, so I know we knew a lot of people from many different organisations that don't normally perhaps connect together. And, we had, say, Love Thy Neighbour, and we had, I don't know, someone from the Lions Club, Second Bite, we had the church, we had Salvos, we had Vinnie's. We actually, I suppose we're used to working like that. So we very quickly brought in many different people from many places, council, with Emma Shannon's support, because ultimately we need to work like that. In a time like now, we actually all need to look at what we have in common, and what we have in common is working through this together and coming out the other end and making sure that we're all okay.
So anybody else think of any more groups?
I know there's the one in Chewton that was set up a few weeks ago, and the Farnsworth Food Bank as well. So that's been a little local group, and really hoping that some of the people who are watching can put some, know of any other groups, pop them in the chat on the YouTube, so we can record them and get the word out to people in those areas as well.
So at the end of the show, we are going to list some contacts on how you can get in contact with these groups, or the central points. We're not going to share names. We're just going to name streets. But if you do want to get in contact with that group on that street, we'll list how you can do that at the end of the show, and on our Facebook page and in the comments at the end of the YouTube in the chat section. Camilo, did you want to say something? Try again, Camilo.
How about now?
Yeah, that's good.
Yep, cool. I was going to mention the Campbells Creek end from where I am, Neath Road and Elizabeth Street down there, and a bit of Princess, a little bit of a, I don't know what you'd name that, Golden Triangle, the Paris end of Campbells Creek. There's certainly, we had met before this kicked off, and so had the intention, similar to Alex's mob up there, but not quite to the same depth, but we had met previous to any of this coming about, to coordinate more connection, more sharing of resources, more coming together, carpooling. We had a cute little meeting that happened. And so that has grown somewhat, and certainly the intention is there to grow that. So big shout out to the Campbells Creek posse.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Camilo. Alex, might you be able to share some of I believe you've got some slides?
Yeah, I've just got a couple of pictures, but I guess while I show them, I just was thinking about how quickly, these kind of networks have emerged. So this was the flyer that we shared for our first meeting. It was just a letterbox drop. I think we did about 120 of these. So that was for our meeting in February. These are just a couple of photos of us meeting in the West End Hall. It was a pretty hot day, so we ended up spilling outside. But what was really interesting about what was happening as we started to respond is that very quickly through a lot of other networks, and particularly on social media, I started seeing that these kind of groups similar to what we were doing were proliferating, you know, around the world, and people were sharing. So this is a letter, the letter that we wrote, that we did our letterbox dropping with, and this was just a map of the streets that we were sort of marking off digitally as they got letterboxed. So I think one of the really kind of interesting things that was going on globally at that time was that lots and lots of groups were activating in this way, and very quickly those groups were setting up shared Google documents with protocols, pro forma letters, templates for guides for how you reach out to community groups. And when I published on social media that I had been doing this here, lots of people wrote to me and said, oh, can you share what you've been doing? And then there was a big group set up in Melbourne that was called Northside Coronavirus Response. I think it's now got 16,000 people in it, and that group became a real hub for resources. And this also has happened right across North America, right across Europe. And some groups are new and some groups are groups that already existed. And in lots of communities, the groups that have already existed have often been people that have worked in previous disaster responsive kind of work, like in Hurricane Katrina in the US, groups like Mutual Aid Disaster Response in the US, and then also lots of activist organisations that already know how to pull together people with really limited resources or existing infrastructure like the community house and Nalderun. So it's kind of an amazing thing that crisis amplifies already existing networks and starts to show us how strong they are when they become so necessary. And also I think it's really interesting to see that, and, you know, we saw this in summer with the fires as well. The first people who respond are community respondents, are very often there before any of the other state apparatus responds, because bigger organisations and the state often move slower. And I'm not saying we don't need the state, but we need, you know, we need to work together. But I think that's one of the kind of incredible things that we're seeing happen right now. And it's kind of amazing to be involved in a really small local group, but know that there's similar small local groups in that web that Kath's talking about, but around the world. So that's been really inspiring. And there's also been a lot of, you know, skills and resources to draw on from those other networks as well.
That's something that I really notice too, and it's partly why I've invited Kath to come and speak tonight. I really noticed how Nalderun was one of the first groups to respond, and very, very effectively and very quickly. So I was, you know, having a chat with Kath the other day about, well, why is that, do you think? Kath, would you like to share that with us? And I think it starts to speak to what does neighbourhood and what does resilience mean?
To be honest, darling, we've been doing that for a long time. We are, as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, First Peoples, we're used to living through trauma. We continue to live through that every day, and we continue to adjust and survive. It's actually one of our greatest talents, I believe. So for us, we also used to constantly moving and adapting, and also working sustainably. So it's always knowing, and in a sense it's for survival, but we learn to spread like that very quickly in order to build partnerships and connections, because that's how we see the world. We see the world with how we're connected, and how we're connected with country as well, when we don't see ourselves as separate. So then we were able to move very quickly, knowing what has happened in the past, and knowing the greatest way to move forward is that level of resilience of coming together as a collective. I describe us as we move like a giant organism, a giant family. Certainly at times things can be tricky, like every family does, but we're very protective of each other, and that is why we moved quickly. When we realised, and we are used to doing it that way. Is that what you're meaning, Nat?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been privileged in that I've worked with lots of different Aboriginal groups and Indigenous peoples throughout my work life, and I've just noticed the resilience, the ability to respond quickly, because I think the word neighbourhood and resilience are really important words, in that neighbourhood is about place. It's where is your place. And if you know strongly where your place is and what are your relationships in place, and Aboriginal people are very good at knowing that. And that's inherent in the way. And that's a sense of resilience, because we know who our people are, where we can speak up strongly, and therefore can act quickly when needed.
I think it's that balance, that, and also what Alex was talking about, working in disaster places. We have that in our spirit to be able to move through that. So it's those two things combined during these sort of situations that I think enable us to move very fast, and knowing that the only way through is together, very clearly.
So Camilla, something that you and I talked about briefly was around, well, how do we define what the group is? Like West End Resilience has just, popped up in the last little while. I know that there's a number of groups that we've already mentioned that have been established for a long time and they don't have a Facebook presence. But I know that they're strong groups and they're connected. They don't have to talk about it because they've been around for a long time. So you don't hear about it in certain domains, but we know that they're there. So Camilla, have you done some thinking around how do we define these groups?
Yeah, sure. Look, one of the things, because I'm interested in resilience, I just kind of I make observations. So I kind of, like, for example, in my own street, I know most of the people on my side of the street, and I know most of the people on the other side of the street, but I also know who knows who, on sort of between the streets. And I know that the people on the corners where there's an intersection all know each other. And these are just things that I've noticed that there are, and I think this is across all neighbourhoods, mind you. So there's sort of an older woman, and you'll see this in other places too, who lives next door maybe to a young family. And they establish a relationship that's similar to a family, like a grandparent, say. One of the things that happens, and you and I talked about this a bit too, Natalie, the people who come in from, who've come from Melbourne, and maybe we've left our families behind. And so we start kind of forming different kinds of relationships with people around us. And so I kind of notice how people become kind of family-like, or they establish a different kind of family with people around them. So, yeah, there are lots of groups that wouldn't even call themselves groups. There are lots of streets that just happen to know, where people just happen to know each other. The boundaries depend on what people, how far people want to go. For me, I always say that, my side of the street is kind of enough for me to handle. I know the people on the other side of the street, but it's like, how much time do you have? It has to do with, do you work during the day? Are you home? The more of a presence you have, then the more likely you are to run into people or meet people or make those connections. So I think that what we're talking about when we're talking about building resilient neighbourhoods is actually a kind of a more focused, concerted effort. It's not just this is what I already have, which is it's probably great, but my understanding is that how can we build on that, and how can we create something that's a lot more solid with as many people. I think groups should be as big as you can handle personally, but the important thing is that we have some connections, and I know for a fact, for someone who, even myself, who believes in resilience, there are a couple of houses in the street I actually don't know. And, they're renters, and it becomes hard, so for me, my challenge is things like that. How can I reach out to people like that and sort of, to do what I believe in? If I'm going to sort of talk about resilience, how far am I willing to push myself to connect with other people?
So that makes me think of the question, which is, well, what are the principles and best practice behind this? What are the things that we need to get right in doing this?
Look, I can only talk about what, because a lot of my interest is based on sort of academic readings and research, and I really love what Kath said about the organism, because some of the reading that I've done is about resilient biological systems. So and systems approaches really interest me. So in terms of resilience, there are things that I've heard people talk about already. Adaptive capacity is one of them. That capacity, that space to grow, to move, to respond to opportunities and challenges, that flexibility. And we see that at the moment, especially in town with the businesses and how people are changing the way that they operate to survive. And that's a great example of adaptive capacity. So we need to kind of, have that in our neighbourhoods and our communities. Diversity is really important as well. And that's diversity of groups, diversity of inputs, of skills, of resources. Efficiency is another aspect of biological systems as well. And that's because that speaks to energy efficiency, to maintaining momentum, in crisis situations. And two important things, which I think Kath also spoke to, symbiotic relationships and cohesion. So making connections where we that are reciprocal, so reciprocity, and really connected. That cohesion, I think Kath was talking about, where people are very strongly grounded in their networks with each other. So
I've got Camilla, I've got a really practical example that we were talking about the other day, and then I might see if other people have got examples. But our neighbours are in their early 80s, and we love them to death. And they were born and bred here, and they, one of them went to the South School, and the other one went to the North School, and they met and fell in love and lived on top of the Wimble Street Hill for the rest of their lives. And they're very gorgeous. Anyway, one of them is got quite significant dementia, and with the isolation she can't really drive and she can't really get out of the house. So every time I drive down the hill, there he is wandering off again. And so I'm often late for meetings because I have to, very politely and carefully go and retrieve him and deliver him back home again. And it's just that thing of knowing my neighbours well enough to be able to go and do that on a daily basis. So what about you, Emma? Out at Friars Town and Friars Forest, what are examples of resilience out there?
Oh, well, I think I was just thinking as Camilo was talking, one of the things that I'm really noticing about the strengthening of the connections within the Friars Town community is the crossing over and the sort of interconnection between people who are very involved in very different work, social groups, very different politically. And because we're all in one place and we're connected to that place and we're reaching out to each other at the moment, we're actually strengthening connections that go outside and across our usual sort of social and political and work environments. And I even noticed I live out at Friars Forest, and so we're an intentional community, and I feel very lucky to be living in an environment like that where we're very supportive and sharing community anyway. But then going beyond that into Friars Town, I'm finding that a really lovely way of deepening my connections with that community at the moment. And I think that's a really important part of building that really lasting resilience, is developing deep and respectful and reciprocal relationships with people that are outside the usual sort of
your social group.
Yeah.
So Alex, you were saying to me about, you door knocked every street, and about how to communicate. Can you explain that with every household?
Do you mean in terms of setting up different ways for people to get in touch with us?
Because my neighbours, they've got rid of their computer recently.
Yeah.
They're only using free-to-air TV and the landline.
Yeah, so we quickly set up a shared phone which has its own number, because we didn't want initially because I was starting it as well, and I've got young kids and I'm not always available on the phone, but also just thinking broadly, and with my partner who's also done a lot of work in kind of social movements, about how good it is to make that phone a shared resource rather than an individual person's number. So we quickly set up a shared phone and put that number on the letter that we dropped out, and that's been rotated. It's now with the third or fourth person. We wrote a bit of a protocol for how to manage that phone, and we've had a few phone calls from people who don't have access to Facebook and don't have a phone that has applications on it like WhatsApp and etc. So we've got a little database that we keep private amongst a couple of us, that we keep track of those numbers and those houses. And so we actually had already decided at the meeting in person in February that we would stay in touch on all, rather than an email list or a Facebook group or a WhatsApp group or face-to-face meetings. We'd just do it all because everybody works in different ways, and then kind of keep track of how to contact people. And you know, I just also was thinking when you were talking, Emma, I just wanted to throw in, like, we continue to meet on Tuesday nights with our West End Resilience group. And last night we were learning about olives and kombucha, and the week before we were talking about different resilience stories. And in this moment where we can actually be in touch with whoever we please, if we have the mechanisms digitally to do so, it actually feels really important to be talking to people who are actually in proximity to us, because we've sort of all of these strange, you know, borders are weird, time's gone funny, everything feels, I don't know, I found it very grounding to know that, and even tonight talking with you, this could be a national call with groups talking about community resilience, but actually the fact that I know that all of you are within a few kilometres or Friars or Maldon or, you know, nearby, makes this feel even more important right now, I think, to kind of have roots out of the digital sphere into the real world.
Amy, anything to add?
Well, I guess it's really fantastic to be a part of this and to hear some of the stories about responses to crises, I suppose, and that's the pandemic and the bushfires. And it makes me reflect on my work at the Neighbourhood House and the realisation that the work that Neighbourhood House is doing across the state is exactly this work. This is why we were set up back in the 70s and 80s and provide exactly the space for people to connect in a community. They're very place-based and over time have evolved with community. So there's a saying in the sector that if you've been to one neighbourhood house, you've been to one neighbourhood house, because the whole point is that it responds to individual communities. So the core part of our work is providing platforms for people to connect in different ways. So, and I think, as we've been saying, the core part of resilience is around connection and it's around relationships. And I agree totally with Alex that local aspect and that place-based aspect is so key. And I mean, over time, I guess the neighbourhood houses have a whole structure that's evolved around them with, you know, governance and incorporated associations and all the rules and policies and things like that. But hopefully we still remain a really responsive organisations, but not probably as responsive as a really suburb-based or street-based group. And it's, you know, it's kind of like the dream to have these groups everywhere, so people do feel connected to their place and to their neighbours. Yeah.
Kath?
I was just going to say, because often people think being part of a community is looking at what you have in common. And I'm actually a firm believer, it's actually purely accepting our differences from each other and seeing the beauty in that and actually working together. And I think in these times in sense of crisis, it almost forces us as a community to do that. It forces us to talk to people that we wouldn't normally talk to and connect with people we wouldn't normally connect with. And I actually think, I wish that we were always like that, because so many of us congregate or feel safe with people that have the same belief system as each other. Our belief system is that that there's many truths, and that it's about embracing the truth, each other's truth, not necessarily having to come together because we all believe the same thing. And I think it's beautiful in Castlemaine how that is happening, that we are coming from so many different walks of life, but coming together, embracing our differences, but the commonality is what we're having to work through together. And that's yeah, I just want to say I think it's beautiful.
Thanks, Kath. It is beautiful. just quickly to say that for the people that are listening on YouTube, if you have any questions for us, please post them in the chat, and we'll get them and we'll try and answer them. Another key reflection for me has been in my area. I'm on the top of Wimble Street, up on the hill, and I never quite know where my place is. Am I connected to Urquhart Street, or down Parker Street and Wimble Street, or Kalimna and Kawika? And like, it's you know, I'm not like Fry's Town is a discrete thing. I mean, Maldon's a discrete thing. Chewton, Campbells Creek, you know, West End, you've based it around the hall and the identity of the hall. However, I'm grappling with place, and I think that for me, fundamentally, the street is a place. It's a place that we share, and it's our commons. It's what connects us. And in crisis, we need to be in place, and being in isolation during the pandemic, we have never been more in place, literally. And so knowing our place physically, I think it's really, really important, and I'm still struggling. So if anybody out there wants to form a group in my area, feel free to contact us. Other comments from people?
I was writing some notes, thinking a bit about what these groups are tracking forward, you know, partly because our group formed prior to the pandemic, and listening to others talk about groups that already existed before and will continue to exist after. And, you know, there's a lot of people, and I think Carmela would have lots to say about this, there's lots of people that have written about what emerges in communities in crisis, and respond, you know, what Kath's saying about the way that it forces us to connect across difference and see our common humanity. And I think there's a lot of people talking about that. But there's a piece here that, you know, it doesn't naturally follow that we'll stay in that state unless we really articulate that that's what we want to see. And there's a bigger conversation that I think you'll return to with the Castlemaine Commons about what happens in crisis and what is the vision beyond the crisis, and how do we deal with, you know, the stimulus package and economics, etc. So I won't go there, but one of the people in our group, Gianni, talked about this idea of train as you mean to play, and it also reminds me of a word that also gets used sometimes in social movements around this kind of organising. It's just called prefigurative politics, but I think I prefer how Gianni says it, train as you mean to play, that what we're doing is also living how we want to live. So, you know, the crisis kind of gives us a moment where our normal day-to-day world has cracks in it and we can't operate in it as we normally do. And so we operate in these other ways, and there's actually beauty in that. And so I think we have to actually pay quite a lot of attention to what is really working now and make sure that we build that into what we do going forward.
Emma, were we going to ask a question about fun and creativity?
Yeah, yeah, it sort of leads on well, I think, from what you were saying, Alex, is there's a lot of lovely things happening with these resilience groups that are springing up. I know we're trying to do in Fryestown a Saturday midday yell to see how far we can spread our voices through the town, and people are doing, you know, take a photo of what your ISO day looks like, things like that. So there's that really lovely sort of connecting and sharing. What else is happening out there? Like, what are the things happening in the sort of more urban areas that's along those lines?
Other people? Kath?
Okay.
We have a lot of fun delivering food. So I thought we would, you know, I got more volunteers and change people's employment so they could be one of the delivery drivers. But I actually really love it, and we all go together, and we have a really good laugh, and it's just that really beautiful connection, obviously through the safety of, you know, the training of the COVID-19 and how you would do that, but still that connection with families and people in community. And it's just really beautiful. Like I've been given a beautiful sunflower I've had people crying when they've come to my door. I've come to their door, and it's just it's just a really it's a really beautiful experience. So I've still been a part of it, but a lot of it is that level of laughter, because you haven't been around people for so long. So it's like when you get together, it's like woo. And a lot of our group that are helping, and Cam is one of them, we connect still every once a week, and a lot of it is about ourselves, how we're going, and then you can give love then when you've got yourself sorted, isn't it, as a group? So yeah, that was beautiful.
Other people, what fun things or creative things are happening?
I've seen in Maldon, it hasn't been that same sort of spontaneous, I don't know, eruption of singing like we saw in Italy in the balconies and things like that. But Maldon has got a lot of established groups. And so one of the things, for example, is the Easter parade that's been going forever and da-da-da-da-da. But they took themselves right out of their comfort zone and posted a video of previous photos and things like that online. So there's been a lot of responsiveness from really established groups who aren't necessarily massively online, to take things to the community in creative ways, I suppose. So when the lights turned on Mount Tarrangower, they go on for the Easter weekend. You know, everyone was invited to kind of come out and do a big cheer, and there's lots of plans for the Anzac Day, when there's normally a memorial service in town and a march and everything, which is really huge, to invite people to go out to their driveways and things like that. So there's a lot of really lovely sort of things happening in Maldon like that.
Emma, would you want to talk a little bit more about Anzac Day?
Yeah, I was just going to say that's happening in Castlemaine as well, with the, I think it's 6 a.m. People are being invited to come down to the end of their driveway with some sort of light, candle or a torch. And I imagine people will be tuned into their local radio, or possibly some streaming of local services that'll be happening at dawn on Saturday. So I think that's something that's happening right. I was going to say it's right across Australia. So people who want to be part of that'll be a lovely sunrise, I think, on Saturday.
Any other?
And Cam, you were going to say something, I think.
Cam, you going to talk about the video, mate?
Oh, that's our next week.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. That's okay. You can talk about it. Go, Camilo. Tell us about it. Camilo.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I think Uncle Rick's just telepathically channeling that we're talking about that, because he just rang my phone. But yeah, we had this fun experience of making the video with Uncle Rick and Chase and Declan, together with Kath and Stu and Justin, which was an amazing thing. But, you know, I think the whole scenario is just so bizarre that if you can't have fun in amongst all this and have a laugh, and we're in a position where we can, most of us, because, well, I know I can, because I'm really fortunate to be in this position. But if you can't have fun and have a laugh amongst it all, then we've lost something severely there. But I'll back just a little bit to what Camilo was saying about that adaptive ability. I really like that that adaptability, because I think this is a great opportunity for all of us, just to accept that we don't have control here, and that we need flexibility, and to just drop your own shit in it, because we don't have control, as I said. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Cool, thanks, Camilo. Anybody else? Any other suggestions, thoughts?
I was just going to share, one of our neighbours is a ceramicist, and she dropped a note in our Facebook group that she was going to put out some little clay packs for kids. And I think it's been one of the most popular posts in our Facebook group, and all these parents were like, wow, excellent. And then everyone was posting pictures of their kids with the clay. And I know that it meant a lot to her, but it also meant a lot to all of us. And, you know, walking over with my kid, he was so excited about someone had left something out for him. And he and I have been writing postcards and dropping them to his friends' letterboxes, even if you can't see them. And, you know, there's a lot of swapping and exchanging. A friend brought a quiche over for me the other day, and I left some veggies out for her. And you know, as a child of the 90s who was quite into mail and zines, I'm kind of enjoying the lo-fi exchange culture that's happening. And there's some really beautiful things, you know, the Bridge Hotels giving away meals, and other businesses are doing lots of pay it forward schemes, and the food bank over here on Farnsworth Street, every time I go there to drop something off, I almost get a bit teary just seeing that this, you know, the honour system of that, it's just on someone's private veranda. So there's some really amazing things happening.
I really like the way that our Prime Minister, Jacinta Ardern, the Easter, you know, the Easter thing where you colour, you find the Easter egg, you colour it in, you stick it in your window. I love being a minor state of that country. The other idea people have been talking about is, sorry, Kath, did you want to say something?
Just very quickly, when someone said the honour system, I remembered. So the community pantry, I'm just going to plug it. If there are people out there that don't normally have to budget because they, or they need food, this is an honour system. It's not, you don't have to have a healthcare card. You don't have to have whatever way, you just ring the community pantry and there'll be food. There's no judgment or question asked in regards to that. And I just wanted to put it out, realising this is a different group of people that we might be connecting with. It's all totally cool.
And is that based at the Castlemaine Community House? Is that right?
No, it's beautifully based everywhere. It's actually, I really love it. It's like my thing. So because there's workers from Community House, there's workers from the council, there's workers from Vinnie's, Salvo's, Amy's a part of it. We've got Lions Club. We're working out of the church because they had the biggest kitchen. We're all just actually working together, and it's really beautiful. Like, so different workers are together. There's different volunteers coming together, and we're all doing different stuff. Is there someone I've missed, Amy? I didn't want to miss anybody that's been a part of it.
Has Chirp been a part of it maybe?
Oh yeah, Chirp. Thank
Salvo's, yeah, Church of Christ.
Bendigo Food Bank.
Bendigo Food Bank.
Yeah, food banks have been amazing. Donations from local community. I just text Marcel, the beautiful human, and she just magically makes it appear. I've had freezers that magically come, and food, and it's been really beautiful how the communities come together in this space. And yeah, I just want to be clear, it is helping everybody. This is not, and we're all working together in this. We've had people donating money, which has been beautiful, because this, when you're making your meals, sometimes we've got like lots of veggies, and, we haven't had meat. And so it's just like having sometimes monetary donations means that we can connect the meals together. So people, and with the boxes. So that's just been really good. And so I'm so glad I remembered to say something. So sorry.
Good on you.
I think we've pinned the info about that, so how people can donate to the top of the Facebook page. So if people are wanting to find out more about that all the contact details are there.
Great.
And can I just make one other quick observation? I just wanted to say that I kind of feel like the kind of beautiful thing that happens in these moments is I feel like this is actually kind of our natural state as humans. I actually think our natural innate responses are of nurturing and caring, and we're often told a very different story about competitiveness and fear, and we live in a system that kind of constructs us to compete and to worry about scarcity. But when we're given permission, because those structures are not operating as they normally do, you see these other ways of being, and we seem surprised, but actually we're super fast, and as Camilla said, super adaptable at doing this, because I actually think this is who we really are, and that's what we've got to hold on to going out of this.
So the one thing I did want to say that hasn't really been said, but it's the proliferation of gardening and growing things and getting our hands in the dirt. And it's almost like the release from that grind of the day-to-day is just, there's a burst of gardening, there's a burst of caring for each other. And I think there's a burst of creativity. People are just being exceptionally creative. One idea I had was that we could all have dinner together at the end of our driveway. And I thought maybe we could coordinate that across all the groups. I want to ask one more question, and Carmela, you might like to chip in. It's hard because I can't see you put your hand up, but you can, you know, say you want to say something on the chat. What's the long game here? How can we build from what we're doing now for climate resilience? And coming back to your, you know, train as you mean to play. But what does that look like practically?
Sorry, is that question for me, Natalie?
It's for everybody, but if you'd like to go first, Carmela.
Oh, okay, sure. So the long game. Look, I think I agree with Alex. I think that what this is doing, what disasters and crises are doing, is bringing us back to our natural state. If we think of how we've evolved as groups. It's not the strongest, it's not the fittest that survive. It's actually the most adaptable. We've come this far. We're inherently social beings, and we've evolved to survive as groups. I think that, you know, the way that we currently, well, not currently, but before all of this, lived in our isolated kind of spaces, going to work, you know, I mean, I'm not speaking for everybody, but, you know, as a generalization, that is very different to kind of the space that a lot of us have now. I mean, I understand a lot of people still have to go to work and do all that, but there seems to be a kind of like, you know, different things are happening that are calling us back to places that we like, or spaces that we're kind of enjoying. And I think that's where we're meant to be. And I wonder if we're going to like it so much that we don't actually want to go back. And I just want to say too that with the connections that we make, from my experience, and I can only talk from my experience, when I've connected with somebody, that connection lasts, even if I don't see them again for a while. So sometimes I don't see my neighbours for a while, but I've had experiences like going to VCAT with one of them and spending a lot of time with one of them working on a case, and that, you know, we will never forget that. So if I don't see her for a lot of months, we're still connected through that experience. And I feel like that's what this is going to bring about. When everything goes back, or however everything ends up, the connections that we make now, this is only my opinion, but I feel like we won't forget them. And so how can we go back to, you know, I don't know what we're going to go to, but the long game is to sustain the parts of this that we're really enjoying, because I think that's, as Alex says, this is our natural way of being.
Thank you, Carmela. Other people on that point? What is the long game? How can we build on this for climate resilience?
I'll add a little bit here. It's back to that old classic adage of think global and act local. And I think for me, local is just over there, that person just right there. And sometimes, as a wise fella that said to me, it's that the first part is thought, and then the second part is action. And there's no point in having the thought without the action. And it's just having that interaction with that person over there. Whereas in the past, you may not have spoken to that person or connected that person. Now we're in a position where people are making those connections with that neighbour across the road where they haven't previously. And I think on a local level, that's critically important when the system collapses and when the shit goes down as it has. This resilience that we're talking about and those little local actions are what sustains us and what keeps us connected and what helps with the food systems and all those intricate systems that make up our lives. It stems from there and it comes from the heart, much of what Kath's been saying about. And yeah, that's for me how what sustains me moving forward through this, for sure, continuing to make those connections on a local level.
Thanks. Others?
Can I, for me, just a lot of what people are talking about, often I find like it feels like that people feel like as human beings we have a lot of control over the situation, and I think we don't. I think country does, and I think this is evident in what has happened recently. So I feel like we have to remember why we're here. And, I mean, I think we're here to protect country and all that's on it. And so if we come out of this with that mindset, because country's healing underneath our feet out there. I mean, I just get so excited when I go out into the bush, I can feel it. If we remember that, and we remember what Alex was talking about in regards to this is our natural state, we have to be brave to do that, because we fall into habits very quickly. We fall into what we think it's meant to be. But I think innately we all know that, what we're meant to be. And we all know that hopefully that we've come out of this, that we don't have the control about how things are going to move and shape, because country has taken that out of our hands. That's why we're isolated in our houses. That's what my personal opinion is anyway.
Amy?
Yeah, I'm not sure what to add. I guess the thing that's going through my mind is that the challenge and the difference between what we're experiencing now with the pandemic and with the climate crisis, it's sort of its speed. So it all happened very quickly. We had to respond quickly to this pandemic, and we were given some really clear direction from government, actually. Whereas when we're talking about climate change, it's the government itself is resisting. It's a very slow moving crisis. And what has been the challenge is to communicate the urgency of action now, when we know we're not going to see an impact for a while into the future. I mean, we're starting to see an impact, but it's a slow building impact. And of course, when we're talking about neighbourhood resilience, I think some of those core things around connection, around having groups, around food security and things are so crucial in our response, but it is very hard to respond in the same way because of the nature of the crisis, I think.
Emma?
Yeah, well, I mean, following on from that, it really is about, I mean, this is why I love conversations like this, because it's about articulating what are the things that we want to hang on to. You know, I mean, things that were happening already, but this has sort of been a really intense time of a sort of a opening the cracks, as somebody was saying, I think it was Alex, you know, in our normal life, where we can actually see some different possibilities. We can practice them maybe in a sort of slightly artificial way, because it has all been so quick, but then we can actually have these conversations and articulate the importance of sustaining the connections and how, you know, how we can strengthen and carry them on into, you know, the post-COVID climate change reality that we're already.
Thank you. And a final word from you, Alex?
Just, you know, some of the reading, I saw a headline that said COVID-19 is a dress rehearsal for climate change. And when you look at the impacts that we're expecting to come down the line, even the conservative ones, it's really true. The upheaval we're experiencing now is, and, you know, I hesitated to say this because we've had a really inspiring conversation, but, you know, what we're facing now is small fry compared to what the climate crisis has in store for us. But the fact that we're getting organised now is really key to how we're going to respond to that. And I think that's the stories that we tell about who we are as people and what we value and how we think about reciprocity and care and interconnectedness. Those frameworks are going to be really, really critical to the kinds of decisions that are made in the post-COVID economic recovery, and then also in terms of responding to the climate crisis. And, you know, essentially, we do need to build power and we do need to fight, because we're up against very strong forces, namely, you know, fossil fuel companies that need to pay for this crisis and the other crises that they've created. But I think that by building these webs and these connections and shifting the way that we think about who we are, that's incredibly foundational to that fight as well.
Great. Thank you very much. And I would like to say thank you to everybody. Thank you, Camilo from Campbells Creek and Nalderun. Thank you, Kath Coff from Nalderun. Thank you, Emma King from Fryers Town and Fryers Forest. Thank you, Amy Atkinson from the Maldon Community House. Thank you, Carmela Leone from, Castlemaine, Climate, I've forgotten the name.
Community Disaster Resilience.
Thank you very much, Camilla. And thank you, Alex Kelly from the West End Resilience Neighbourhood Group. I I would like to encourage people that are watching to post questions, give us some feedback. If you are interested in setting up a neighbourhood resilience group, please get in contact with us or go to Carmela's Facebook page. What's the name of that other Facebook page, Emma? Something about love neighbourhood.
There's also the With Love Your Neighbour, Castlemaine and Surrounds Locals Connects COVID-19 Facebook page.
That's the one.
There's a Teuton Mutual Aid Facebook page. Yeah, so there's quite a few resources there, and we'll post some of them as well.
And if you would like to ask any of those sources, if there is something happening in your street, we can then put you directly in contact if we know the person that is involved. So this was the Castlemaine Commons, our second show about neighbourhood resilience. And I'd just like to say the Castlemaine Commons are myself, Natalie Moxham, Emma King, Alex Kelly, Tim Adam, Matthew Abud, Kath Coff and Declan Furber-Gillick. And next week we have a show. Kath, what's our show about next week? She's muted.
It's just very exciting, darling, that you just don't know. It's all a mystery and you have to come.
Yes.
We have, yes, well, we have an intergenerational panel of, I'm going to have to say it.
First Nation, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, Indigenous people.
Yeah, we've got so show 3 is a focus on First Nation people talking about the pandemic. Show 4 is going to be on environment and climate and maybe the green stimulus, things like that in relation to the pandemic. And I think show, 5 is going to be on economics, all the different dimensions of economics. Please drop us a line, tell us what you think, give us some feedback. What questions should we be asking? What guests should we be having on? So big thank you to everybody. Is there anything else we need to say, Emma?
Just if anyone out there is a good tech person and would like to join the collective, we're a little bit clunky still, so we'd really appreciate your help. So anyone out there, get in touch.
We need somebody that can operate. All the
Yeah,
digital stuff.
can I just say, Nat, it's great to be part of this. I mean, and anything's possible, because I thought I was going to a tango night. I've ended up, and this is what it is. So anything can happen, I'm trying to say.
Oh, and there was the through popular demand, somebody wanted to have an after party, and of course I talked to the tap room, and Jacqueline's on the case. So maybe next week we'll have an after party.
It could be a tango thing, so I'll get dressed up again.
Yeah, good on you. So thanks you, everybody. I'm going to see if I can get Vicar and Linda dancing again.
Great. Thanks, Natalie.
No worries. Thanks, folks. Bye.